Hello, Reset with Raven family. Today's guest, SWAT team hostage negotiator, undercover narcotics investigator, marketing executive, former high school basketball coach, former hospital administrator, and founder of a school security consulting business, and now motivational speaker and author. Talk about resets, right? Welcome, Terry.
Well, thanks for having me on, Raven. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
I am overjoyed to talk with you as well. This is so exciting. Right before we hit record, I was telling Terry that I have listened to so much of the content that he's put out and was amazed. He's at over 400 podcasts. So this is you're a pro at this. Terry, to say that you are accomplished is an understatement with all of these career successes. Now you are a motivational speaker and author. Talk to us about what led up to you becoming a motivational speaker.
So really it was the last 10 years of my life. I've been fighting a rare form of cancer that has seen me be on a drug after I had my initial surgeries. My cancer appeared on the bottom of my foot, and I had some surgery to remove that. And then my oncologist put me on a drug that basically gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for like 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And as my oncologist said, that's not really a cure. It's more, we're trying to kick the can down the road to basically buy you more time to have more therapies available. That was 2012 when that began. 2017, I had to stop the drug. 2018, I had my left foot amputated because the cancer came back. 2 more surgeries in 2019. And then 2020, I had my left leg amputated because of the cancer right in the middle of the pandemic. And so all these people were telling me, oh, you ought to go, speak about your story. Tell your story to people. It's going to be inspirational. And I was really kind of hanging back with I don't think so. I'm relatively a private individual. I don't like sort of putting myself out there, but I'm also smart enough, I think, to think when enough people start making a suggestion to you, that maybe you ought to kind of perk up and think about it. There's that old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So I'm not going to tell you that God ever spoke to me, but I think what God does a lot of times is put people in your path and make suggestions, and then it's up to you. You want to go down that path, that's fine. You don't, you want to take another path, that's fine as well. So enough people started to suggest that. Same thing with the book. You ought to write a book. I've never written a book before. What do you mean? I'm not an author. So I think when enough people say things like that to you, you got to kind of perk up and be like, maybe I ought to pay attention to that.
Oh, wow. That's good. One of the things you just said that stood out to me or like hit a chord with me was we're trying to buy you more time. This past couple of years with the pandemic has caused many people, me included, to put life into perspective. Like, what matters? What do you value? It's a reminder that life is like a blink of an eye. Things can change so quickly. Like, we have a whole new, terminology now: social distancing, 6 feet. People that weren't familiar with quarantine, all those type of things are now like part of our norm or our regular masking. All these different things that really started to make people think about their own life, their longevity, their morbidity, all that type of thing. When you think about like in that space or in that moment when you were given that information and someone, a physician tells you, we're trying to buy you more time. What did that mean for you? And what does that even mean for you now when you think about your time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to think of 2 ways to answer this. When I first found out that I had cancer, I had done everything right in my life, and I think I experienced pretty much all the stages that we would associate with grief. When you find out that you have this very rare form of melanoma, that you sort of like, well, wait a minute, I'm in denial. No, that couldn't possibly be. I've done everything right in my life to try to be healthy, And then you get mad, and then you sort of bargain with God, and you go through all these stages. And then you just realize that, this, for lack of a better word, sucks. But you have to embrace the suck. You have to realize that, you know what, these are the cards that I've been dealt, and I have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And I remember back in 2020 when I had my leg amputated, and the other part of that was I found out I had tumors in my lungs, which actually I'm still being treated for. I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, to our church, and I planned my funeral. And I go on these podcasts and I talk about motivation and the need to keep moving forward. And when I let it out that I planned my funeral, I got some brushback from people that were like, well, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? And I was like, well, last time I checked, I think we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. So, I was kind of in a situation where, everybody dies, but not everybody really lives. And years ago, I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I really loved. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for at the end of my life. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking to hasten my demise in any way, shape, or form, but I feel that I've lived the purpose for which I was put on this earth. And as a result, death is not nearly as scary to me as it is for so many people that I observe that sort of live a casual life. And as a result of living that casual life, their goals, their dreams, their ambitions become a casualty of that unplanned living. So, really time for me is, it is what it is. I mean, in 2020, I said, I had this CAT scan that found all these tumors in my lungs. A couple months ago, my doctor showed me that CAT scan, and I have no medical background, but I kind of know what's supposed to be there and what isn't. And I had fluid all around the pleural spaces of my lungs, and I had these big tumors in my lungs. And I looked at my oncologist and I was like, how was I alive? And he was like, I don't know, which said to me that God's not done with me yet. So when I die, how I die, where I die, way above my pay grade. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about dying. I spend more time worrying about living right now.
Oh, wow. When you said everyone dies, but not everybody lives, that's a lyric from a song. I'm thinking about "Moment for Life" from the rapper Nicki Minaj. It made me think about that. She's like, I want this moment for life. You talked also about purpose. That is, I believe it's something that many, if not all people are searching for. And then as you also talked about death, it made me think about my cousin is a funeral home director. So we talk about his career and being in a place where people are, have entered that end of life and being alongside the families. And we were talking about like the grieving period, and what our perspective was that people that maybe are the most devastated, especially family members, is feeling like, I left something undone. I left something where I didn't give it my all, or I didn't tell this person I love them, or give them their flowers. It's that phrase, give people their flowers while they're alive. And when I think about my own like mortality, the biggest thing I am concerned about is like living full, because you can be accomplished and not feel fulfilled. Back to the purpose thing. How do you know that you are living in your purpose?
Yeah, that's another great question. I had an actually former player of mine that had moved to the Colorado area where my wife and I live, and we had dinner with her and her fiance one night. And I remember saying to her, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while, and she kind of looked at me and she's like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and then living that reason. And I always try to tell people that, you need to do that with we always talk about an open mind. I think you need to find your purpose or look for your purpose with an open heart to take on things that I don't know. That scares me a little bit. That makes me a little bit nervous. That makes me uncomfortable. And I guess this is something I always recommend. And I try to do this even today for myself, to do one thing that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you nervous, that is potentially embarrassing for you. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, just some small thing every day that you do that makes you uncomfortable. Because if you do that every day, when the big things in life hit, you'll be so much more resilient to handle those things. When, as you know, somebody dies, or you lose your job, you're living out of your car, whatever those big things are that happen in your life, you'll be much more resilient to handle those. And I kind of going back to purpose, we all have a unique gifts and unique talents that are just unique to us, that you don't have. I don't have the gifts that you have. You don't have the gifts that I have. And that's what makes it unique. But so many people just kind of muddle through life. And then when they get to the end of it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Those are always seem to be the people. I'm going to make a huge generalization. Those always seem to be the people that want another month or another year, to kind of, I didn't do anything, so I'm going to do something now. Don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and live that reason. And you have to be open to it. And a lot of people quit. I always use the example of Colonel Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken founder. And I know that sounds like a goofy story, but if you think about it, he didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken after he retired, till he was in his 60s. Now, I don't know if that was his purpose in life, but I'm going to assume that it was. Can you imagine if, in his 30s, he would have been like, I'm good. I'm good right here. I'm not going to stretch. I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to improve. We would have never had Kentucky Fried Chicken. And that's just an example, that everybody knows about Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is why I use that. Can you imagine people that, are moving down the road in life, and then they butt up against an obstacle and they quit, and they never get to that. I never got to my purpose because I quit. I gave up. And the other thing about that is, when we do run up against these obstacles, we're great about blaming. We've got to place blame. We got to blame somebody. Wait a minute. I'm not going to reach my goal, so I've got to blame somebody, mom and dad, or, my boss, or my station in life, or whatever that is. And when I got cancer, I had several people ask me, well, who do you blame for this? Like, what do you mean, who do I blame? It's like, well, you've got to blame somebody. I'm like, why do I have to blame somebody? It's like, well, you got to at least blame God because you got cancer. I'm like, I don't blame God. I sort of joke. I'm like, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list, and said, Terry Tucker cancer today. I don't think that at all. So I very few people in life, and I know this is a huge generalization, but very few people in life take responsibility for their own success and happiness. If you do that, if you want to take responsibility for finding your purpose, that's the only person who's going to be able to take responsibility for it. So get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and live that reason. And don't just sit back and wait for life to come to you, because you're never going to find your purpose that way.
That is so true. One of the things I've been working on reminding myself too is control what you can control. What do you have the authority over? What can you do in terms of, because we can, to your point, we can always find someone else to blame, but at the end of the day, it's like you're stuck with yourself. You're stuck with you. You have to look you in the mirror. You have to get up every day and continue going. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, when we think about motivation and even just purpose along the road of life, when you have those setbacks, disappointments, devastations, what would you say to someone? Like, we talked about how, like, there's so many ways and so many things that come up in terms of you could quit. What would you say to someone who is 20 or 30 and feels like, I still haven't found my purpose? Because I know with the Colonel reference you just gave, like, he was in his 60s. So for someone who's in their 20s or 30s or 40s right now, who is very disenfranchised or dejected of, like, I just can't seem to figure it out, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to keep going. I would tell them that everything you need to be successful in life is already inside you. You just need to find it, pull it out, and use it to your benefit. And the other thing I guess I would say is that we're all going to experience pain in our lives. Pain is inevitable. And it doesn't have to be cancer pain or even any kind of an illness. I mean, you could break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You could, flunk a test at school, or you could not get the promotion at work that you think you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering is optional. Suffering is what you do with that pain. Do you take it and use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual? Or do you sit back and kind of wallow in it and want people to feel sorry for you and, feel sorry for yourself? And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm going through a lot in my treatments, but, I keep going to those treatments every day. And I still have dark times. There's no S on my chest. I'm not wearing a cape. I have bad days. I cry, I get down, I feel sorry for myself. And when I do, I remember a couple stories that really help me. And this first one's it starts out a little weird, but trust me, hang with me on this because it really is going somewhere. So I remember reading an article that about a professor at Johns Hopkins University back in the 1950s. And he did an experiment, and it was a fairly simple experiment. He took rats and he put rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the rats could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And right as the rats were getting ready to sink and to drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, let them rest for a while. And then he put those exact same rats in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Think about that. First time, 15 minutes. That's all I can do. Can't do it. I'm giving up. I'm going to drown. Second time around, 60 hours, which says to me two things. One, the importance of hope in our lives. We have to believe that whatever we're experiencing, whatever we're going through, whatever road we're on is going to lead us, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not 10 years from now. It's going to lead us to something that's better. It's going to lead to a better life for us. So the first thing I learned was hope. And the second thing I learned is just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought that they could possibly handle. And that sort of dovetails into the second story that I always remember. I have a friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL, some of the toughest men in the world. And the SEALs have what they call their 40% rule, which basically says that if you're at the end of your rope and you can't continue to go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum, and you still have another 60% left to give to yourself. So whenever you get into those dark places, and we all do, we're human beings, just remember that a lot of times the impediments that we run up against in life are the impediments that we put there, that we put in our way. So get out of your way and realize that everything you need to be successful in life is already inside you.
Hope, belief, the mindset, and it's already inside of you. I'm curious, what in this season right now, what motivates you?
I guess I sort of have to tell you another story. So what really motivates me is something that I learned. I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old, and I played all the way up till I graduated from college. And one of the things that team sports, I think, teaches you is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And so I am on a clinical trial drug now for the tumors in my lungs that more than likely is not going to save my life. But it may save the life of somebody 5 years from now or 10 years from now that I don't even know, that I won't even be here when that happens. And I think that's part of being, that's part of something that's bigger than yourself. And, tomorrow I'm getting ready to go to treatment. And it's really all how you look at it. Do I get up in the morning and have to go to treatment, or do I get up in the morning and get to go to treatment? And that's, I think, all how you look at it. That's all how your mindset is. Yes, I have to go to treatment tomorrow, but no, I really don't. I could just say I'm not going, but I get to go to treatment because what motivates me is the fact that I'm going to help somebody by the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood tests and my scans and things like that, that may help these doctors develop a medicine or an injection or something that helps somebody 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now to save their life so that they can continue to be with their family. So it just goes back to being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And that's kind of what keeps me going right now.
That is phenomenal. As you were talking, so many things came up for me about um, what we do in life being like bigger than us. My background is in healthcare, so I work in healthcare administration right now. And in some of the days where I'm frustrated, there is the reminder that like when I'm working for the team and for our patients, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than my frustration. It's bigger than my when I got the 2 a.m. calls, like, oh, we need a doc here, and all types of different things. It's bigger than me. And even think about like, you know, we talked about this, alluded to a little bit earlier, how you've been on hundreds of podcasts and you're sharing your story. And for me, when I get online and even do the podcast, when I'm naturally or at heart an introvert and not a big oversharer, one of the things that keeps me pumped and keeps me motivated is because the inspiration that we're able to put out in the world and have these conversations, someone needs to hear it, and reminder that it's bigger than me. My unwillingness sometimes to want to share, someone needs to hear this, someone needs like that encouragement, someone's having a terrible day or terrible few months, or just received some terrible news, and they need to hear someone who is continuing to keep going, who is not letting that stop them, and who's real and honest. Like, hey, I have bad days too. I feel sad. I cry. Like it's a reminder that people are human and go through things. We have feelings, we have emotions, and it also too, I feel like it almost is like it takes the mask off. I was just having a conversation with my mentor, and we were talking about like with the space we're in right now with social media influencers, that people are sharing all of the highlights, the great stuff. Look at me and all, but there are people that are really hurting. There are people that are hurting under the mask and behind the highlights or the highlight reels, and have real life going on, right? Even in the midst of the pandemic. And you were talking about like how you have had to have other surgery, have had other procedures, and have to go into the hospital. It's a reminder too that though, the pandemic has impacted like the world globally, there are people that have other healthcare things and other healthcare concerns that they're still publicly or privately having to do with. So it makes me think about like how sometimes we have a public face, but there's privately things that are going on in people's lives that they are dealing with, and just how grateful people like myself are that you would come and share your story with people, because someone needs to hear this. Thousands of people need to hear this who are going through their own fights, their own fights in life. You digressing a little bit, you are also an author. The title of your book is Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. I'm curious, out of the 10 principles, which one is your favorite and why?
Yeah, that's sort of the $1 million question. And it's fun for me as an author to, when people reach out to me who've read the book, there's, each chapter is a principle, and they are not in any particular order. Number 1 isn't any more important than number 7, so to speak. And there's always one when somebody reads the book that's like, hey, number 5 was the one that really gravitated to me, or, number 8 really resonated with me. And it's fun for me as an author to see that. And even though I wrote the 10 principles, there's one, you're absolutely right. There's one that really kind of resonates with me. And it resonates with me because I've done it. I've done it a lot of times in my life. I think most people have. And the title of the chapter is this: most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I know I've wanted to do something and it's like, oh, what are people going to say about me? Or what if I fail? Are people going to laugh at me and things like that? And we all get into that. I mean, I'm old now, so I could care less what people think about me. But when you're young, you care about what people say or what people think. And, you want to be kind of in the in crowd and things like that. And so that's a big one for me because I've done it so many times in my life where I don't think I'm going to do that. And I always tell, especially young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So don't wait. If something scares you, go ahead and do it. Get out there. It's part of that, what I talked about earlier, do one thing every day that makes you uncomfortable. If you do that, when you're presented with a great opportunity or a big opportunity that scares you, you're going to be resilient enough to handle that and be able to move towards that instead of like, oh, no, that scares me. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, that it reminds me again of another conversation I had with my mentor when she said, would you consider that, your fear about this, like God has something so much bigger. Like this is so you're magnifying. She was like, you're kind of magnifying the problem or the fear. It's really, think of it's in your head, it's in your mind. And also too, when we talk about, what someone else might say or think or feel. I remember even when I started the podcast, I was like, the sound of my voice. It's like getting comfortable with that and just putting it out there anyway. Or, I made a mistake or there was an error here because of course we all, I think, are guilty of, we like analyze ourselves the most. I was like, oh, why did you say that? Or you had 10 ums or you had too many likes. I mean, highly critical of myself. And I remember thinking like, is that going to stop you from moving forward? Is that going to stop you from putting something out or doing something you've always wanted to do? You really just made me think about how we magnify our own fears. And oftentimes the thing about it is it makes me think about too, that when you're putting out something that is to your heart, from your heart, with substance, with significance, all that other stuff, it really doesn't matter.
It doesn't. And when you were just talking there, I was sort of thinking back to a conversation that I had with my publisher one day. I told him, I said, I've been on all these podcasts and I listen to every single one of them when they come out. And he's like, well, why do you do that? I said, because I want to get better. I want to, like you say, I don't want to, how many times did I say, or did I stutter, or the story was choppy or whatever it was. And he said, no, Terry, you're missing the point. It's not about being good. It's just about not sucking. And I'm like, no. I said, well, first of all, thanks for the title for my second book, Just Don't Suck. That, that's great. But I said, no, that's not what it's about for me. And I mean, maybe for a lot of people it is, but for me, it's wanting to be a good guest so that whoever podcast I'm on, their podcast is better. We're interconnected. I mean, I'm a guest on your show. You allowed me to do that. So I want to be the best guest I can be for you. And I think a lot of people just sort of get in that rut where, I can just sort of wing this and see what happens. Well, maybe you can. Maybe you're good enough to do that. But I mean, I remember when I started my first podcast, somebody reached out and said, would you be a guest on my podcast? And I was like, what's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And I had all these notes all around the camera because I was so afraid that, I would stutter or I would freeze or I wouldn't know what to do. And now you get better. The version of your podcast 1.0 is not nearly as good as 2.0, as 3.0, as 4.0. As you get better and you learn how to do this, you're going to make mistakes, but people are willing to forgive your mistakes if you're genuine, if you're honest. And it's like, yeah, I blew that. I shouldn't have said that, or I should have said this instead of that, or whatever. I made a mistake. But it's the people, like you say, that put on the face and it's like, hey, everything's perfect. Everything's not perfect. We're all dealing with our own battles in life. And people will always want to think it's about you. It's not. Like I always say, you're unique, but you're not special. Sorry, I hate to tell you that. Not everybody gets a trophy. You are unique. You have unique gifts and talents that you should use to serve your God, serve, your fellow man, whoever that is. That should be your mission in life. And I think you'll find your purpose that way. But so many of us think, well, I'm special. It's all about me. It's not all about you. Sorry, hate to tell you that.
Yeah, we're talking about how it's bigger than you, and I believe most, if not all, of the things we go through, it's so we can lend someone else a helping hand when they're going through it, because it's a breath of fresh air when you talk to someone and they're like, "Hey, I've been there before. I went through something very similar, if not the same thing, and here's what I did," or here's just some encouragement. Here's just some encouragement that, like, what's as the song says, trouble doesn't last always. You will get through this. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And as you said before, keep going, keep fighting. That's really one of the biggest messages that I hope this podcast brings for people, is like the perseverance. Keep going. As we're wrapping up, one of the things that is coming to my mind is really, in this season in my life, I'm thinking about legacy. I'm thinking about how I want to be remembered, or what I want to be remembered for. Like, what, because you talked about earlier too, like you said, I've already planned my funeral. And it makes me think about too, like, when you talk about what will people say, how will I have left an impact? How will I have made something better? Because I believe that's true leadership, like influence and impact. You impacted someone's life. What would you say is what you want to be remembered for?
I don't want to be remembered. And I know that sounds kind of trite. I have no desire to be remembered. I mean, nobody's going to name a street after me or a building or anything like that. I'm not going to be remembered. But let me give you this, what I call truth that I think might help. And maybe this is sort of an answer, but what we all leave behind is what we weave in the hearts of other people. And I think that's important. What am I giving of myself to you, to another person, to somebody else? And I remember there was a nurse. It seems like all my stories are, athletics or nursing. I mean, when you're in a hospital, I'm sure I mean, you're in a hospital administration, you understand this. But I had a nurse that when I first met her in the unit that I'm being treated on, she was already a nurse. She's about 25 years old, but she was learning how to be treated, or how we did things, or how they did things in the unit. And a couple months ago, she was taking care of me by herself. And she said, "Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable." And I didn't really know how to respond to that. I said, "Well, I hope you tell me the story, And so eventually she got up the nerve and she said, well, here's the deal. She said, "When I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing." She said, "I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. And I talked to my mom and dad. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon." And she said, "And then I met you." And she said, "I see what you go through every day with the nausea, the vomiting, the shaking, all that stuff. And you keep coming back. You keep trying to make a difference. And I read about your story." And she said, "And I knew I was where I was supposed to be." Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had a positive impact on her. For your audience, who out there that you have no idea who they are would give anything in the world to walk in your shoes for just one day? That wants to be like you, that from afar kind of looks at how you conduct your life, how you're living your life, what kind of are you a person of character, humility, things like that? Or are you, hey, it's all about me. So I think it's important for all of us to kind of realize we're interconnected. And I remember John Wooden was a basketball coach at UCLA when I was growing up in the 1970s. And he had this great quote, and it went like this: "A careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way." So I always kind of remember that it's like, hey, there are people that are watching me and how I live my life that maybe want to emulate the way I do it, that maybe want to emulate the way Raven does it, whatever, whoever those people are. We have no idea who they are in our lives. So I think it's important that whether we want to be remembered or not, we're going to be remembered by the way we conduct our lives.
Wow, that's pretty profound. The impact that we leave on people's hearts. Wow, that is phenomenal. Whew. So before I ask my final question, how can everyone find you online?
So I have a blog called Motivational Check. I put up a daily thought for the day, and with that thought comes a little question that maybe you could use to see how that thought could maybe impact your life in some way. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message, which a lot of times is a video or a story that's a little bit longer. You can leave me a message at Motivational Check. You can get access to my social media links and things like that. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
Perfect. And what's been the greatest lesson in your reset?
So I'm going to give you another story, if you don't mind. And we sort of touched on this, but I'm going to sort of follow up on it. I've always been a huge fan of Westerns growing up, Western movies, television shows. My mom and dad used to let me stay up late and watch, Gunsmoke and Bonanza. And my favorite was The Wild Wild West. And I'm sure your audience is like, I have no idea what those shows are. Those
I
are old
do.
time
I
stories.
watch it. My parents are of
There
that
you go. That's
generation.
right. I like your mom and dad
watch
already. So 1993, the movie Tombstone came out, and it was a huge blockbuster. It starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday and Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made up characters just for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp, his whole life, had been a lawman. And these two men from entirely divergent backgrounds come together and form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying of tuberculosis at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from where I live. The real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium. He's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt Earp at this point in his life is destitute. He has no money. He has no job. He has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to play cards with Doc, and the two men pass the time that way. And in this almost to the end scene, the two men are talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, I was in love with my cousin when I was young, but she joined a convent over the affair, and she's all I ever wanted. And then he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt kind of nonchalantly says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life. And get on with living yours. Raven, you and I know people that are out there right now that are kind of sitting back and like, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. When this occurs, I'll have a successful life. When that happens, I'll have a significant life. What I would say is, don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents, and live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. One, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
Ooh, that is a word. Wow. Yes. Get out there and start living life. Thank you so much, Terry. That was phenomenal. I needed that. I needed that. If no one else needed that today, I needed that pickup to just go. Like, don't wait for perfect timing. There is no such thing as the cards they're not going to align. Just
Right.
go. Just do it. Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. All right.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Another amazing episode. These are the cards that I've been dealt, and I have to play the cards that I have. Everybody dies, but not everybody lives. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. You all, this message was wonderful. Someone is going through their own reset and needs this. Make sure you share this with someone. And remember, a reset is always available to you.